Okay.
You didn't tell me you talked to wife.
I didn't?
No.
I did. Okay. In the car. Okay. The Tuesday, 8th of September, 2015, meeting of the Planning Commission is hereby called to order. Ms. G.
Mr. Jean?
Present.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Here.
Mr. Meeks?
Here.
Mr. Rankin?
Here.
Ms. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Wodiska?
Here.
Thank you.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
I so move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Outstanding. Receipt of petitions. Any petitions?
I have none.
Having none. Excellent. Okay. Number 5, old business. Item A, West Broad Street Small Area Plan. We are going to continue with our public hearing. Take it away, Mr. Stoddard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go ahead and move down to the podium so I can operate the slideshow.
That's good. You have to leave by what time?
I've got a couple items on, but they're after the zoning and the parking, so it could be 45 minutes.
We'll say 9:05.
Okay?
Okay, great.
They'll be on that other issue.
Yeah, you don't need to go through anything that's repetitious.
Understood. So what I'd like to do is just start by hitting a few items that are in the staff report, and that is first with the recommended action for tonight. The Planning Commission is still in a public hearing, and the staff recommendation is that the public hearing be closed and that the Planning Commission review the updated schedule for plan development and approval, which is included in the timing section in the back of the staff report. That updated schedule shows the plan coming back through the Planning Commission and the City Council for approval in November of this calendar year, 2015.
I have a question about
A couple things to talk about specifically tonight. As for the Planning Commission's review and feedback on the vision and goal statement that are now explicitly called out in Chapter 1. They were already in the plan text, but now they've been pulled up and identified specifically as the vision and goals for the plan. And also to look at updates to the concept in Chapter 3, which is what most of the slides tonight are going to focus on. And then some additional information that's just in the staff report, and this is not only for the Planning Commission, but also for the general public. There have been some questions about sort of what's the purpose of the small area planning, where did this come from? And the background section really calls out that this is something that the city embarked on first with its comprehensive plan in 2005, the updated city vision in 2009, and then the more recent small area planning efforts that started in 2011. And this is the 4th small area plan that the city has embarked upon. With that, I'd like to go ahead and hop over to the slides.
Could I have a quick question on that before
Sure.
you move on to that? I'm a little bit confused about the recommended action, the closing public hearing and concurring with the updated schedule. If we close the public hearing, does that mean any other time we meet on this, people can't comment on it?
Oh, they certainly can. With any planning commission format, there's always sort of receipt of public petitions, and it's up to the discretion of the planning commission to how they want to handle those, either before the meeting or during the meeting. The purpose for closing the public hearing is just to make sure that we. Oh yeah, that didn't work out well at all. Do it this way. There we go. The purpose of closing the public hearing tonight is just to make sure that that forces us to re-advertise it when it comes up for the Planning Commission's formal action.
Okay, so that would be another public hearing at that time?
Correct. Yeah, we would open a new public hearing for the adoption.
Okay, and as corollary to that question, I would like to know, since after we do this tonight, We're going to have Environmental Service Council, the Parks and Rec are going to comment on the same plan, right? And if they make recommendations, would it get into the plan? Will the other recommendations that came from other boards and commissions and from the EDA, will they get into the plan? How do we know when this plan is actually finished so we can close the public hearing?
So that's one of the things that I took away from our last meeting, was that the Planning Commission wanted to see the impacts of the comments
Right.
from all the other boards and
Okay.
commissions, and that's part of the reason for closing this public hearing, that we don't have all those yet. So
Okay.
the idea is, let's close this public hearing, get all the comments folded in, and then bring it back to the Planning Commission as a more complete item.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
You're welcome. Okay, so moving into the presentation. There we go. This is context. You all have already seen this, other small area plans that have been adopted. This is the West Broad Street area, number 6 on the slide there, stretching from the downtown area out to West Street. Planning process. This is the updated information that's shown in the timing section of the staff report. Coming to the Planning Commission tonight on September 8. October 5, council walking tour, then coming back on October 19 for another work session with the Planning Commission, and then November 2, looking for a Planning Commission action. Then going into that joint work session with the City Council, and then City Council action in November. So the discussion focus for tonight is about that introduction chapter, making sure the Planning Commission has reviewed and given feedback on that vision and goals. History and culture, there's no new information there. The plan language has simply been streamlined. And when I say streamlined, what I mean is that in reviewing some of the chapters, staff discovered that sometimes information was repeated across multiple chapters. And to make it more readable and more accessible to the public, as well as boards and commissions and staff, we tried to remove that duplicated information and make sure it shows up once in the plan where people would expect to find it. So if it's a transportation suggestion, it ends up in the mobility chapter now instead of in some other place. And then the concept chapter. And the concept chapter, what we'll talk about is sort of staff's attempt to reconcile the comments from the Planning Commission and the EDA, that they seemed to be on the surface going in different directions, but I think this concept chapter will show that there may be a common ground there that can be reached. So developing a common vision, people ask sort of where do these things come from? They come from a variety of sources. There's the council vision that was adopted in 2009. There's the guidance and the comprehensive plan from 2005. And then within those sort of broad policy statements, there's also the local context of what's going on in this particular area, and then the regional context of what's going on around the city. And those things get folded together to put together a common vision. Policies, there's the council vision statement, which talks about all these items. I will not read them all off. There's a bunch of them. There's also the comprehensive plan, which calls for a number of other things as well. Local context, we've talked about this before with the Planning Commission, that this is really sort of the neighborhood connector of this west side, the entire west side of the city. That more than half of the city's population lives sort of near, in, or adjacent to this planning opportunity area. This is also the key thing for connecting. This is the piece that connects the downtown area and the west end of the city. Local context, also there's some history here that we've talked about that this has been the area of the city where most of the redevelopment activity has been happening. The projects there are listed along the right-hand side, beginning in 2004, the Broadway, and then it was the Byron, the Reed, the Spectrum, the Flower, Dominion Jewelers, Hilton Garden Inn. There's been a lot of activity in this section of the city. Existing land uses, there are a lot of numbers on these charts, but the takeaway is that it's a mix of uses, whether it's mixed use or light industrial or office or retail. There are a lot of things going on here. And then regional context. How do we make this something that's special to the residents of the City of Falls Church? That there's Tyson's Corner out to the west, there's Seven Corners to the east, Roslyn Ballston to the east, Mosaic District out to the west. And so what does that mean? So it can mean sort of how do we create connections to those other activity centers for this place. It can mean how do we offer something unique, and it can also mean that there are regional demands that are going to be put on city infrastructure as these activity centers get developed, and that can mean a lot of transit, a lot of travel, a lot of pressure for transportation infrastructure. And so the question is, how does the city want to accommodate that? And what was heard in the Mobility for All Modes planning thing was effort was that city residents were interested in increasing transit access and walking access as the means for meeting that transportation demand. Trying to get away from the we're going to put everyone in a car, because what this map shows is that if you try to put everyone in a car, they're going to drive through the city in order to get to those other activity centers. So there have to be other options besides driving in this place. The vision statement then that's included in the plan, and because it's a quote, I'll go ahead and read it out. The West Broad Street planning opportunity area will become a vibrant, economically viable, diverse, walkable, bicycle-friendly, that's an extra comma, destination along one of the city's major commercial corridors. Redevelopment will reinforce the concept of unique businesses and shopping nodes designed to be environmentally sustainable and that enhance the character of the city. And that gets broken down into a number of goals that are also outlined in the plan, serving as a community guide for development, creating a great place within the city, integrating with the existing fabric. That means not only within the planning opportunity area, but around the planning opportunity area. Taking advantage of underutilized spaces and redeveloping those, further developing identifiable nodes of activity, enhancing the open space that's available today and creating more of it, using environmentally sustainable options during construction, and then also increasing the number of transportation options that are available today. So what I want to do is jump into sort of the concept chapter, and some of this is the same that was presented before, the key concepts, that respectful building design, innovative development, creating connections, developing nodes, and thinking in the long term but acting in the short term. And so the concept map then, what it shows is potential sites for redevelopment and infill, and then also shows some possible land uses of what could be expected to go there. Possible building heights in terms of how tall should things be, whether they're on Broad Street or another street, and then how can pedestrian access be increased in the planning opportunity area. And so the concept is now, at this level it looks similar to what was presented last time with the redevelopment sites identified. There have been a couple additional infill sites identified. Those are easier to show at the block level, so I'll go ahead and jump into those descriptions. This is the 300 block with the Broaddale Shopping Center, the City Hall to the north, and the under construction Harris Teeter to the south. Changes since last time, where before the concept plan called for an 8-story building across from the Harris Teeter. The plan now says 4 or more stories, and that responds to some of the conversations we had, that this group had in the last meeting, that we've already got mechanisms in place that say we'll let you go development up to 4 stories. If you want to do more than that, then there's a process for that. And so this plan is trying to reflect that, saying this is an appropriate site for 4 or more stories.
But that's for what, a B2? If you want to go over the 4 stories of the 55 feet, it's a B2. Isn't this, doesn't this have an OD overlay?
It's
so
in the
would
OD
it be
right
different?
now, and that's also one of the things we're trying to staff. I'm sorry when I use the word we. That's one of the things that staff is looking to try and clarify about what's the role of each of these chapters in the small area plan. That the concept seems to be the right place for talking about the vision. What should the future of the community be? And from that, you get sort of your land use plan of how high do you want things to be? What's the right land use mix? And then finally, you get down to zoning. So the zoning chapter is where the plan can talk about what is or is not the appropriate zoning based on what's the vision for redevelopment and what are the land use goals that are trying to be achieved.
The zoning chapter of the small area plan or the zoning chapter of the comp plan?
Of the small area plan.
Small area plan. Oh, and we don't have that in front of us right now.
No.
Okay. I'm very pleased to see that a lot of these changes have been made. You've taken off a lot of all the high buildings that we ask you to remove. But this particular building, because it's in the OD plan, I would prefer to see it as some of the others are noted, as retail up to 4 stories, because it is in the OD. If they want to make it higher than that, or if they want to make it residential, which I don't think it should be, they would have to get it rezoned.
So that's, sorry for interrupting, but that's.
Oh, that's okay, you didn't interrupt.
And so that's one of the things I think we can talk about, is that the zoning chapter, I think can sort of talk about the intent of zoning. That, right, zoning is the tool for sort of regulating sort of development, but within the concept chapter, if the city, the concept chapter, I think, should be clear about what the city's looking for. Is the city looking for something that only goes up to 4 stories, or is the city willing to see something that's more than 4 stories? And I think the concept chapter is the place to clarify that. And then the zoning chapter is where you can effectively sort of have that negotiation with the development community, that you can say, look, the existing zoning is OD, and that's the way it's going to stay until a proposal that comes in that we think meets the sort of requirements for a special exception.
Right. So this wouldn't, like, if the zoning stayed OD and we left this here, that would indicate to a developer, hey, you'll have to go through the special exception process, but and maybe we don't agree to this necessarily, but we would be open to this kind of a use here, but it would be a special exception. It wouldn't be something that's already in the zoning.
Right. Both rezonings and special exceptions are legislative actions. And so long as the zoning map stays the way it is, the vision chapter is the place to have the conversation about what you want to see. The zoning sort of changes, or the special exception changes, are where you can say, wait a second, this is not what we meant, or this is what we meant.
Excuse me, but could you refer to the OD design and explain it to people?
Official design.
Right.
It's the official design overlay on this particular block and on blocks close to the Falls Church, because it either has historic properties like the Falls Church, or because it's trying to reflect important buildings in that area and an important design area. And so what we want to do is have anything that goes in this particular space reflect on the Cherry Hill Park and City Hall and the library, and not residential 4 or more stories. I really feel strongly about keeping that retail up to 4 stories.
Yeah, and I just want to comment.
Thank you.
I agree with Ms. Rogers. I just feel like we have a very successful shopping center right there. It's retail. It's retail now, kind of. I guess it's a motel, but still, it's not residential now. And I do think that we have to keep some of our commercial property commercial. And I really think that this should reflect what the other side did. It should be retail up to 4 stories, because that kind of works with that block.
I respectfully disagree, but I like it the way it is.
We can vote on that.
We can vote on that. But I do think, like, for this current situation, it is retail. It is OD. I just don't think we want to say residential here right now. I think we'd like to see ability to get more commercial next to a shopping center that's working well, because commercial likes to be with commercial. I mean, we already have all these people buying stuff here. We would want them to continue to buy stuff on that block.
And it's still not a very big lot either.
No, and once you
not
get
big at all.
even if we force a special exception there, they could go to 8 stories, and then you've got that canyon going down Falls Church. That
It's just not big
little
enough.
quarter.
It's not big enough for the parking
No, it's
necessary
not.
for residential, but it could be successful retail because it's next to successful retail.
And I think that's important also because of the Christian Science reading room. Sometimes we've mentioned about moving that, but still, I just, that is such a small, I do not see residential on that. And I think we had this discussion, how many weeks ago?
I personally think that with the Harris Teeter Cross Street, you know, obviously if you go through a special exception, you would do whatever you would do to prevent some canyon look or 8-story, whatever you want to do. But I think, I personally think encouraging something 4 stories or higher with the residential but retail could be appropriate on that block if it's done well. That wouldn't prevent somebody from just putting retail there, 4 stories or less. Obviously, they could do that as well. Commercial, whatever. I think by limiting what we're willing to see in certain areas too much, it's going to limit the potential for redevelopment, which I think is really important. So I understand everyone's opinion. I just want to make sure that I weigh in and say that I think that this is appropriate for that location, obviously without having any ideas what the specifics would be. But it wouldn't prevent the uses that they've talked about if we left it like this.
Well, we need to move on in the interest of time because we're going to lose Mr. Stoddard here. But I think the the difference with this block is the OD designation. So it's not, like at some point you have to draw lines and say, you know, this is an area we've zoned a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I would want to leave lots of things open to possibility, because what's there now is horrible. And if we restrict what can go there in its place too much, I love La Caracuena. That's not what I'm talking about. You guys see what's next to La Caracuena?
Well, but
so I think that if we limit it too much, we could be stuck with the motel for a long, long time. So I agree with the OD importance, but I think that there's a lot that could be done that could improve the block that could potentially be more than 4 stories.
okay. Well, drive on.
Another site
Well,
that's
I'd like to
identified
see us
on this
come to a
300 block that
resolution on
was
that.
not before is the use of sort of an infill sort of retail use to the west of the Broaddale Shopping Center. Today, that's a surface parking lot, but there's certainly sort of a potential as sort of travel demand changes and travel patterns change that could be something else. Especially if there's a more coordinated approach to parking. One of the things that is not on the dais, but initial calculations show that within this planning opportunity area, there are upwards of 3,000 parking spaces available within the POA, which is a lot of parking spaces for a city of 13,000 people. And so it may be that there's an opportunity if we could perhaps look at this, if staff could look at this maybe through a different lens or try a couple different approaches with property owners to get better access to some of the parking that's already there today. And that's the kind of approach that might open up some of this infill and these smaller format buildings. Moving over to the 400 block. So again, this is clarifications on the style of the heights of the buildings. On the corner there of Virginia and Broad, calling for mixed use that moves up to 4 stories, and that's to be consistent with what's to the south of Broad Street there, the existing residential community, and also the potential for sort of infill to the right, which again was that infill on the surface parking lot. That would also be fairly consistent with what's next door to the west, the Reed. And then to the south, still calling for something of 4 or more stories, where it's away from sort of the townhouse style development and next to the more multifamily style. An additional call out, I think, on this slide that may not have been there last time is the pedestrian passage going all the way through the block. Today there is an access from Park into the Spectrum. But this concept would use the space between the Spectrum and the Reed, turn that into a pocket park, and carry that pedestrian connection all the way through to Broad.
Excuse me, before you go on, what is that labeled office, private school, 3 stories?
Office, private school, 3 stories.
Behind the blue?
They've got like a daycare in there.
Huh?
Like a daycare in there.
But shouldn't that just be called commercial or office or something instead of labeling it as something as it already is?
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're looking for something, so for
It should
the
be
existing,
just general, but why do we have private school there where we've got office, you know? I don't
Sure.
understand that. And people, you know, look at it and say, what?
Sure.
That
The,
doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry, there's a bit of a mixing of terminology here, right? This is the concept plan. As a first pass, I don't know if you remember, but the last time this came through, we had 2 maps for every block. There was a use map and a height map. And with this pass, we tried to combine those into one map so that the information was more
Because there's no sense in
available.
calling something as it is now, it's future, possibility of future use.
Right, and when we cleaned it up, we didn't genericize the uses, but we can certainly do that in the next pass. The 500 block, so here a substantial number of changes to the heights of the buildings, moving to a maximum 4 stories along Park Avenue, and then generally calling for 4 stories or more on Broad, except in cases where it sort of bumps up against something that's slightly lower density, which would be sort of on the south side of the lots there, or where it's either a smaller use or the floor plate wouldn't accommodate it. The other thing that's been added here is the shading to call out the office node. That's been identified in the land use chapter, and now we're carrying that information into the concept chapter, identifying the office node that's centered along, that's focused on Broad and Oak. I can never remember the semantics for centered. One of the questions I had that I wanted to raise with the Planning Commission on this slide in particular is to get your response to sort of the size of the office node. Is it maybe too big? Is it not big enough? Is it moving in the correct direction or not? And the other thing about these maximum stories, where it says along Park, maximum of 4 stories. Is it for the entire building, or is it just for sort of the street frontage? So the person walking on Park, if they experience a 4-story building, is that sort of desire still met, even if, say, on the back half of the building it steps up to 5 stories, where it might better adjoin to sort of the taller buildings on Broad?
Well, Melissa and I were just talking about this. Where it faces Broad, it should be saying 35 feet and not 4 stories. I mean Park, where it faces Park. It should be saying 35 feet all along there instead of 4 stories. I mean, unless you can keep 4 stories to 35 feet.
No, it has to be 3 stories, up to 3.
Little short, little short offices.
But related to that, I could see step backs
And you know
work,
what, Paul,
right?
I understand that this is not carving these requirements in stone, but it is going to be a part of our appended to our comp plan, and people are going to look at it, and they may as well get the right impression.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, if the sentiment is 35 feet, 3 stories along Park, and maybe step back to something higher, I would love to say that in here, because I think that's one of the things we're facing with current proposals, is that we haven't been clear. So I think if the sentiment is, hey, 3 stories along Park, maybe step back to 4, I don't know what everyone would be comfortable with, it would be great to indicate that on here, I think.
I think the sentiment was that it would say what the current zoning code is. And so if it's 35 feet on Park Avenue, which I believe it is, then that's what it would say.
Well, but
and
then,
if a special exception were to be requested, then you can consider it.
Right, but what I'm looking for isn't just what, I mean, the zoning speaks for itself. So if we're just going to stick to the zoning, what's the point of this? So to me, the idea here is to give a developer a sense for, if you want to go through the special exception process, what are some things we would consider? And if what we'd consider is 35 feet along Broad, stepping up to 4 or 5 stories as you move back, then let's go ahead and say that. Knowing that the zoning doesn't support that now, you go through the special exception, and you may not get it, because who knows who's in charge at the moment, but at least that was a vision that at one point in time we thought was okay. I think if we just want to say, hey, the vision is the zoning, then this seems like a not a particularly useful exercise.
I'm foreshadowing Paul's excellent conclusion on the purpose of these small area plans, but I think the purpose of these small area plans is not to tell people what, it's to be clear sort of on the zoning, but it's to show some of these opportunities that may be, so for example, we may know that right now it's impossible to consolidate a block, but over the course of the next decade, it may not be impossible to consolidate that block. But it's conceivable that this will last a decade, and I think we need to make it clear that it's 35 feet, and if you can consolidate it and it's exceptional, then we may talk to you. And I think that's more what this shows. I think, I can only paraphrase, but Russ had a beautiful quote about this is detailed, but too detailed, and it needs to be more, I can't really do it justice, so I won't try. But I think we've gone a little, I think it's general is what we need to keep these. And our guideline is the zoning code, which we put a lot of time into.
So we're saying, hey, the zoning says 35 feet commercial. So what do we, so we're just going to color that blue and say, hey, we'd love to have a 35-foot tall building commercial here? I mean, what's the point?
Well, it's better than the 2-story houses we have right now.
Right, but the zoning already says whatever it says.
But I think it's clear to people where they can, again, the purpose of these small area plans is to show where areas can be consolidated, where there may be development opportunities that are not necessarily readily apparent, but they are not consolidated today. This isn't, it's not.
Sure.
But
I guess
this isn't going to happen in the next 3 years.
Right. But I guess I don't understand what, obviously anything we do is a snapshot in time, but if tomorrow somebody said, hey, I consolidated this stuff and what I'd like to do is 35 feet on Park and step back 5 stories and do this awesome office building, and we would say, hey, that sounds great, why not try to indicate that in here to encourage a developer to come forward with that kind of a thing versus, hey, I want to do 5 stories of self-storage here.
I think part of the problem maybe is that on the planning commission itself, I don't know if we're all in agreement. I do think because it is Park Avenue, that at the street, we don't want it really more than 35 feet because there's small houses across the street. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't do a special exception to add depth behind. I think the other thing is.
First of all, I agree with that. I'm just saying you could say here, office, retail, however you want to say it, frontage 35 feet, step back to whatever. That would be fine with me.
But we're not going to.
And I'll also admit that my reason for wanting to do this level of detail at this point is to have some of these debates now, so that when the special exceptions come in, maybe they can go a little bit more smoothly. Because the one we're working on right now is like 2 years in, where we haven't gone farther than we were in the first day.
And you couldn't. I mean this in the nicest way. You could not be more wrong. It just would be impossible to be wrong.
That was sweet,
in a more aggressive way. So the point of a special exception is it's special, and the specialness gives it an exception. And so those are very much supposed to be, by the code, they are supposed to be very, very special and an exception and on a total case-by-case basis. And you've tried for 2 years to get like this quantifiable special exception. That's absolutely contrary.
To be clear, what you're referencing is people have commented about Mason Row as too big. And when I ask people like you, what is not too big, you do not give a clear answer. You say 55 feet tall. And then you say, well, it could be 85 feet over here. And that's all I'm saying is, so, okay, that's the definition of special exception. The definition of a plan isn't to say like, hey, here's the zoning code. Look, we've drawn a box around 2 lots in case you couldn't figure out that someday those could get combined. I mean, this isn't helping
but I
anybody.
think the consensus is that on Park it should be 35 feet. Exactly
on the
where,
on the front.
Exactly where the step back to 35 feet would hit depends on the project.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how are you going to put that on here?
35 feet with options for step backs as you go away from Park.
Okay, well, we're gonna.
That's hard? I don't understand.
2 speakers. Well, we have 9 minutes left. So.
I will just say that if you go on 1.7 of the new sections, it does say on here pretty clearly that we're supposed to be promoting the integration of new development into the fabric of the surrounding areas by establishing a framework of emergent density levels and architectural design. So we are saying that we're expecting them to be at different levels and have setbacks so that they can merge it. And I totally get what that we want a vision here that people can go beyond maybe what's in the zoning. But in this case, I actually think the zoning is correct on Park.
Okay, so to be clear, you wouldn't want to allow any step backs. You'd want to limit to 35 feet for the entire lot.
No, I'm
that's what the zoning says.
All I'm saying is that Park, at the face of Park, I think it should be 35.
I agree.
But it doesn't really matter because they can come in with a special exception regardless.
I understand that, but the point, I thought the point of this plan was to give some guidance to potential developers about the kinds of things that would potentially be special enough for us to make an exception.
So if I could, I haven't heard anyone disagree with the idea of stepping back. And so maybe the best thing to do is
they just don't want you to mention it on the plan.
Table this conversation for now. We'll see if we can, staff will see if we can come up with some sort of language that accommodates that concern, and we'll bring it back to you for review.
Well, what I was going to point out to Andy, and I think is the slippery slope that you're going to get into if you do that, is we haven't even gotten into building setbacks and sidewalk widths, which, as you know, is another hot topic. So if you set back 14 feet as opposed to 20 feet as opposed to 18 feet, I think it changes where that step hits. I don't think you can, I think Paul's a talented fellow. I don't think he can put that in this document. If you can,
I just said some words that seemed to work. Could we just use those words?
So give us a chance.
Okay.
We've got another chapter coming up, not tonight, but the urban design chapter is where we're going to talk about streetscape and how the buildings relate to one another, how they relate to street users, how they relate to adjacent neighborhoods, and that's the place where we can show how to step back works, how to step backs work, and how do they change with the streetscape and the adjacent buildings. I think that's the place to talk about this. Moving into the St. James blocks, as they're called in this plan, this is pretty similar to what was shown last time. The one addition is showing a possible infill on the St. James campus itself. This would be an expansion of the St. James facility that they've got a couple of outbuildings now, and this may be a space where if they're looking for expanded facilities, we should be communicating with them early to make sure that those come all the way out to the street and they address the street. The current buildings sometimes don't address the street in a positive way, or they have the back, or their back is turned toward the building. And so this is a way to indicate that we'd like to have that conversation. And then this map also stayed the same as it was. Except that additional information in terms of calling out the retail node with the orange bubble was added. And something I didn't get to talk to as much as I wanted to last time was the idea of creating another connection to the W&OD trail on the west side of this area. That today, the connection from the trail to the rest of the city, if you're coming from the west, is a little bit disconnected. There's a bit of an awkward underpass you have to make it through. This is an opportunity to expand sort of a park area that exists today, make that a nicer little amenity, also use it as a buffer between the redevelopment and the residential, and use it as an access point to the W&OD.
May I, just quickly? Paul, again, for consistency, why are we calling it what it is now? Bank, 1 story, light industry, auto, 1 story.
Yeah, we can genericize
generic. That. And, you know, I know we've got Dominion Jewelers down there, but again, we're calling it what it is and not what it could be.
Yep.
Okay? Consistency. Thank you.
Fiscal sustainability, this is a question that comes up a lot in terms of what's the motivation for the redevelopment. One of the sort of motivations is how do you want to manage the city's growth? The Washington, D.C. area is a growing area. There's more population, there's more jobs. And so what's the city's share of that, and how does the city want to position those within the existing fabric? And then second, how can the city best use this redevelopment to better address its fiscal needs? City staff is working on an analysis. We're looking at these particular infill sites that are identified in the concept plan and looking at what would the fiscal impacts of those redevelopment projects be, and we're running that through the city's fiscal model.
I do have a question on fiscal impact. I'll speak quickly. It seems to me that every new development that's come in, they've given us a fiscal impact, and that's supposed to expand our tax base. It doesn't seem to me that it's doing what it's proposed to be doing. I mean, we're not getting any extra services. Our infrastructure, our sidewalks and things are still going downhill, and our taxes aren't being lowered. So do we need a different...
So I'd respectfully point out that I don't follow that logic. I mean, our tax rate could be higher without those. I mean, I think you'd have to actually look at.
We don't know that.
I know, but we don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any logic. I mean, you'd have to look at the numbers. You can't just say, hey, our tax rate is high. And
it's not only the tax rate. I'm saying we're not getting any extra city services for those things. So I'm just wondering, should we have a different fiscal impact analysis? But of course, it doesn't have anything, I don't think, unless we're going to include it with this, in this plan. I don't know if maybe that was.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is
Inappropriate to
maybe
bring
we
up.
should get a review of the way it's currently calculated to see if that gives people more confidence that it works. I don't know.
I can reach out to the Economic Development Office,
Yeah.
EDO staff, and maybe the right thing to do is to have a little workshop just about sort of what's in the fiscal impact model, does it work, and then maybe we can look at some recent projects and try to do a little bit of truth testing with it.
Right.
You know, my concern about putting it in this document, and maybe this is Ruth's question, is, you know, your chart on page with the red and the yellow and the green and all this stuff, you know, it's pointing us in a direction I'm not sure we're going to end up for 25 years, and or 30 or 50 or whatever the amount of time is. And I think my hesitation on this is, it's almost written as if we can get the maximum amount of tax rates where that's what our vision or our goal is. And I'm not sure that's for us to decide. I think that's future generations perhaps. And I was a little hesitant. Did I phrase that at all? Perfectly. So I'm not sure, I'm not certain it's applicable to us here today. I think it's not applicable, and I'm happy to talk about it, but it's a suggestion that somehow these red areas are somehow inferior and we got to get rid of them, and I'm not sure I'm there.
Well, I mean, you're the planner, but I mean, I assume developers look at maps like this to figure out where development might be viable. And if the point of the plan is to help developers find opportunities, then it seems like a map like this is valuable. I mean, I think they could probably figure it out on their own, but
Well, except
this is just a statement of fact, so I don't know that it's proposing anything.
Except that one of the things that we're supposed to be looking at is the City of Falls Church vision for 2025, written in 2009, and it doesn't seem to me that this particular view and some of the things that we're looking at follow this.
Well,
I mean,
except that I
this
think that
is a much friendlier.
well, I think two things. The special exception process has a whole component about the fiscal impact. So, to the extent that we have any involvement in that, that's in my mind, a big component of it. But I think this one here, sound finances. I mean, I feel like if most of our city had building values less than or equal to land values, we would not have sound finances. I think that's a fairly standard.
Yeah, but so again, going to the subject of consolidation, and in the interest of time, we do have to move on from this, but I would just say there are some things on there that are red that I will tell you personally, I don't think that there is any way in my lifetime will be consolidated.
Sure.
I think that there are some uses and some owners on those properties who are beloved by the city and their building happens to be red, so I don't know what that means.
Statement of fact.
I was surprised to see, I think that it is also not necessarily a statement of fact, and I was surprised very much to see, for example, Broaddale Village is red, and I'd be sort of interested in how that building is assessed, because I know what the rents are there, and it's shocking to me that if that's the case, that seems somewhat
Well, certainly this should be
amazing.
accurate and probably dated, so you know, because obviously things change over time. But
well, given the rents and where I think the assessment should be, I'm surprised to see it in red. Okay, but
see, that's a good example where maybe that's why this is valuable, because if it is in fact red and you're a developer, you might be like, "Oh, I didn't realize that. Maybe that is a good place to potentially redevelop." Sorry.
So this slide, right, this is sort of part of that same conversation, looking at sort of what's the value in this area. And you talked about sort of sound finances, and right, a lot of the real estate properties in the city real estate taxes in the city today come from the residential side of the ledger, not from the commercial side of the ledger. And this text in the lower half of the slide is part of the reason why, that if you exclude the buildings that have been redeveloped since 2000, the buildings are worth overall less than the land. And so when you go to tax that value, you're taxing the land primarily and not the buildings, that there just isn't a lot of value in that land. So these are some of the slides that I think got skipped in the beginning of the presentation, but I wanted to touch on them again. Why have a small area plan? Develop a common vision for the future. Try and coordinate the city policies that are out there into a single document. Try to meet the city's fiscal needs for what it wants to deliver in terms of services and benefits. And then also how to appropriately manage the city's share of regional growth. The focus for today's discussion, the vision and goals, which were in the introduction. It seemed like there were a lot of head nods or no disagreement on those. History and culture, that language was streamlined. That was just an update item. And then the concept chapter, I think we had a pretty good conversation. I've got some notes. So staff will try to turn those around into an updated concept chapter.
Mr. Chair, I do have a lot of other comments on this, which I know that we can't make. And my question is, how do I get these comments addressed? Do I need to make an appointment with you and tell you what I'm?
October 19th.
Oh, I think we'll be under the same time constraints.
No, we have a work session.
Okay. Thank you.
If you have written comments, I'm happy to take them.
Okay.
If you want to meet one-on-one, I'm happy to do that too.
Okay. Thank you.
This is really a time, these work sessions, just to be clear, the work sessions are really a time for the entire group to discuss things and bounce things and ideas off of each other. But if there are specific issues that any of the planning commissioners want to address, I'm happy to have that meeting.
Well, I think that will be a helpful work session because I think that some of the other boards and commissions will come up with some of the same issues that we have identified.
And then the planning process, again, the future sort of schedule of events, Planning Commission tonight, October, another Planning Commission work session, and then looking at November for the plan approval.
Okay, so we have two speaker slips. The first one is Madeline English. And I would ask you to limit this to 3 minutes because we were supposed to give Mr. Stoddard back at 9:10, and we have gone over that.
I haven't been called up yet, so I think we're not in trouble.
So
good.
you were verbose. Well, someone came and gave you the high sign, but we'll see.
I thought he was way back.
Okay. Name and address.
My name is Madeline English, and I live at 315 Grove Avenue, Falls Church, Virginia. I have never seen, at least not in surrounding jurisdictions, a latrine permanently installed and next to a residential development. This is what is being proposed at the bottom of Grove Avenue and next to Jennifer Lane. There is a ditch that runs across that area that carries off surface water from the surrounding area. How will this be redirected and where? Why is the placement of a public latrine and a food concession even being considered? After all, the businesses across West Street provide the same things and should continue with any new development. As for me, I certainly do not want to give directions to Grove Avenue by saying, look for the latrine on your right as you enter Grove Avenue. I think this is a project that city officials should burn the night oil and check and recheck their homework. There are many residents who think that their concerns are not being heard. On questions and concerns, safety, especially children, who is responsible for policing the lavatory? Cleanliness, who is responsible for cleanup and stocking toilet paper, paper towels, etc.? Hours, who will be responsible for locking and opening the bathroom on a daily basis, and what are the hours to be open? Noise, how will this be policed? Lighting, how will this be handled so it is not too light, not lighting up the residents on Jennifer Lane? Parking, where there is food and bathroom facilities, there will be vehicular travel. How much area is designated for parking? Additional traffic could become a Grove Avenue destination. We have cut down trees, cemented and built over grassy areas, and built bigger and taller buildings. We are beginning to look like the concrete jungle that surrounds this city. I hope that predictions are fulfilled and that vehicles stop instead of traveling through. That in stopping there is enjoyment, purchases made, and return many times over. For if not, the city's population level, present and projected, is not sufficient to sustain predicted revenue level on a long-term basis. Of interest, when I first moved here in the early 50s, the population was a little over 10,000. That 10,000 was the limit that you had to have to become a city. Today, this many years later, the population is approximately, over 13,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Polivka.
Thank you. My name is Ann Polivka, and I live at 1005 Jennifer Lane, and I would like to comment that the last time I heard the discussion in the local, the concept plan, there was this latrine comfort station that Mrs. English was referring to, and I would like to say in your concept plan, I would like to urge you not to put a comfort station anywhere near residential. If you go and look at Vienna, it's completely surrounded by commercial, and I think in your concept plan, that's what you should particularly aim toward. I think the particular location now is particularly bad. And I would like to urge you to note that even small changes can have severe impacts. For example, I live on 105 Jennifer Lane, and our West Home Grove Association kept the grassy area where the comfort station is being proposed to be placed. We maintained it as a grassy area. And one day we woke up and they had killed all the grass and they put in a gravel path there to, quote, ease the bike path. Now we have a whole bunch of trespassers behind our townhouse, and we even had to call the police because we had a homeless person living there. So I just want to urge you, when you think of these concept plans, that even small changes can have immense impacts. And I think, again, there is no place for a comfort station close to residential areas. And the second thing I'd like to keep in mind in terms of your concept plan is, as Melissa said, you really should keep commercial commercial. I really don't think a concept plan that goes toward high density, high buildings really is in the character of Falls Church. And it really saddens me if that is the direction that we'll be going. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Klein.
That doesn't want to move. There it goes. Kathy Kleiben, 203 Grove Avenue, Chairman Meeks and the Planning Commissioners. Thank you for having this hearing, this continued hearing, since I could be with you this time and I couldn't be with you in August. So I'm glad to be here. I actually have some questions based on Mr. Stoddard's presentation, and then I'll go to my speech, which won't be 3 minutes. Regarding the Hilton Garden Inn, the map shows it all as 6 stories, but of course it's not 6 stories on North Oak or Park, and it would be good if it could reflect. You know, I walk that every day. It's certainly not 6 stories on Park, but it gives the misleading impression that 4 stories would actually be lower on Park where it's not. So it'd be good to reflect that. And I had a question as we went up towards kind of the Taco Bell higher up on West Broad, and I could be misreading it, but it looks like several current retail properties are being suggested to be replaced by residential properties and townhouses. So I would like to question that. And I'd like to keep, as someone said earlier, commercial. Okay, so as you can hear from my neighbors, what we're concerned about is a strip of land. It's a WO&D path and its surrounding adjacent grass between Grove and kind of, I'll call it Weston Park, because that's where it goes. It's currently going into West. Soon it will be rerouted if the Mason Row project goes forward a little more towards Park. And what this is a buffer concept. And so what I'm talking about here is both a concern for us and a concern for the entrance to the West End, and about putting a caboose there, about putting a meeting room there. There were a number of different things which I'm not sure have been written out. At least nobody let us know if that's been written out, along with the potties that would be right at the entrance to Grove. But also the concept of a buffer. Currently, when you walk that stretch of path, there's bushes that were planted, I believe I was told by VPIS, that kind of create a buffer. They turn red in the fall, and they kind of protect the bike path, Jennifer Lane, the West End, and those people who walk that every day like I do, from the traffic on West Street. And we've talked about it so many times in the Mason Road discussions of the last 2 years, is this buffer area of the WO&D path. So it was really a shock to see so much development being talked about, impervious surface, Wi-Fi, cabooses, kind of this development in the buffer area from the development. And so that's what we're here to we're concerned about, because we're doing a lot of discussions, and it's really important to keep buffer areas as a buffer, both for the West End and for other areas. And also, why duplicate? Why would the concept plan seems to be talking about Wi-Fi. We're gonna have Wi-Fi across the street. Bathrooms, if Mason Road goes through, we've talked to the developers, there'll be public bathrooms. Bike areas and bike repair, they're planning that in Mason Row. Why duplicate? So, let's keep commercial areas commercial and buffer areas buffer and open space. And this particular, we'd love to see, we ask you to help us revise the plan so that this area of the WO&D path between Grove and Weston Park doesn't become impervious surface, keeps the buffer area, and keeps some of that protection and division between the commercial that will come on West Broad and the neighborhoods that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Massey.
Good evening. I'm Mark Massey. I'm not a polished professional speaker or lawyer or any of those things, but I do want to talk kind of from my heart about the plan for that buffer area. That's a very important little buffer area to that community. It really is. I'm not sure how many times y'all have actually walked that. I'm not sure if you've ever gone out there and kind of felt it. You get rid of that, you turn it into more concrete and potties, you just totally ruin it. We do not need more impervious surface in that section. We do not need more, oh gosh, I do not know what the right term is, acidification, urbanization, whatever. There's a character that Falls Church has. It's almost unique this close to DC. And I think that character is what makes this area valuable. It's part of what makes Falls Church really special. And there's a ton of push to raise tax money, blah, 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 blah. That's nice. I think it was noted tonight that, doesn't seem like that's necessarily working real good. But you've got to maintain this pleasant, this little slight spot of respite that you get from all the concrete around here. And so please do not destroy that. VPIS and everyone else in that community has put a lot of time and attention into creating that and using it. It's used, it's a very effective little buffer, and it's just a little bit of space. Please leave it alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Veraxis.
Hi, I'm Lisa Brooks. It's from 301 Grove Avenue, and I don't have anything prepared, but I just wanted to come and back up Kathy and Mark and Ann and say that, first, let's keep commercial in Falls Church. We don't need to be bringing in all this mixed use and tall buildings on Broad Street or on Park Avenue. We don't want concrete canyons to be driving down. And also for the buffer, I like that buffer down there. It would be nice to have a welcome center in Falls Church, perhaps, but I don't think it's necessary. And with all the discussion of Mason Row possibly going through and being put up, why do we need to have a restaurant and a visitor center and a restroom at that area? Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew Colangelo.
Hello, Andrew Colangelo, 1003 Jennifer Lane. So I'm new to the area, so I'm still getting used to it, but I grew up in the Fairfax area, have been to all the Vienna parks and larger parks in Fairfax County, and I kind of had a sense in my mind of where a concession stand and supporting bathrooms and the Wakefield parks off of Braddock Road, where there's a place in the community for those. And in my mind, it's much larger parks, much larger parks. Maybe West End Park could support a single bathroom and having trouble placing a concession stand there, but maybe to that park it could be supported. But to put that type of support area in this buffer area, which we've been referencing for months and months and months next to Mason Row, it just seems completely out of context to me. Maybe within a bigger redevelopment, but just from my sense of scope of what we have around us in this region, it's just not supported there. Thanks.
Thank you. Cindy Wackenbarth.
Cindy Wackerbarth. I live at 304 Walnut Street, Falls Church. I come in support of green spaces. I'm wondering, when I looked at these pictures, where the green space was. Falls Church is such a beautiful place with some beautiful green spaces, and I'd like to see more green space. For instance, this little park areas behind the Byron. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous back there. The park beside it is very nice, but I just really saw a lot of concrete. So I'm a butterfly person, and I think that the WNOD Trail is trying to be a monarch flyway from Loudoun County all the way through, and I'd like to see it stay the way it is or even greener. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And so ends the public hearing. I think we need a motion to close the public hearing. Is this the case?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to close the public hearing, moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Paul. If you got to get going,
Continue.
But it's not continued. No, it's closed. So we can re-advertise the next session. No. So because the next time we have a public hearing, we have to advertise it again. This is not the final document. We have not taken action. Okay, item 6, new business. Seeing none, we're on to 7, which is other business. I had one thing, September 21st. I probably won't be here, if that's of great substance. Okay, item 8, approval of minutes.
I have something on that as well. This September 26th,
Yeah.
where we've been invited to go to the Economic Development
Right.
Authority retreat.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that, because I think that this is that it's the type of meeting that is not open to the public, and I don't think two bodies.
Yes, it is.
Is it open to the
Yeah.
public? Well, then I think we should advertise it and make sure people come, because I don't want to be with the EDA, given what they've said that they want our small area plan to look like, which is not what we want it to look like. I don't want to be there. And while decisions are, and I'm I would like to actually see it in a more public setting, but I mean, it's their retreat, so.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's an issue.
Doesn't anybody else have an issue with that?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And I think it's probably going to be an issue in the upcoming campaign that I think many of our city council people don't really understand the process and are not completely clear on what the EDA is supposed to do and the Planning Commission is supposed to do. So that's interesting. We can ask the candidates that. I'm sure that that's not confusing to the city staff, and so that they are always quick to disabuse the EDA of their burgeoning authority. But I think we should note in some way that
or
we're...
lack of.
something to that effect. But I'm not sure.
I just
I'm
don't
not
know
sure
why
who's
we're being,
going.
I don't know why we're being invited to this.
They would like for us to go if we would like to go. That's
I don't think you have to go.
What was explained to
I'm
me
afraid
is
not
they
to go,
would.
to tell you the truth.
Afraid to go and afraid not to go.
Just to make it clear,
I don't
I
wanna
will
go,
be
but I'm afraid not to
kayaking
go.
with 14, 11-year-olds, so I will not be there. But
It's
if
at my
hold up your
office. We'll
end.
provide
I'll hold up
refreshments on the house.
And also, this is something they do every year. They have a retreat.
Well, it's just
And-
that I went to that EDA meeting that they
Right,
held
right, I know.
as you were there, and I was quite disturbed at the way it went and their approach to this particular document, and they're being encouraged to,
Right.
But are we concerned? I mean, like Rob said, I mean, their actual authority is well defined. I mean, they're just another
They need to be
board and
reminded
commission
of
that
it.
gets together and
I think
files
there are
an opinion,
members
right?
of the city council who don't really understand that.
half the city council served on the EDA, so I mean, I think they should understand
Well,
that.
but I think also, and
Anyway, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying I think I agree. The EDA has pretty well defined responsibilities, and if they want to send up opinion pieces, I mean, it's like anybody can do that. I don't feel that threatened by it because I think
you can't make your position known.
I was, so let me clarify, I'm not meaning to speak for Ruth. So I certainly don't feel threatened by it. I think the concern, when I looked sort of at their agenda, was that, there's a lot of planning commission stuff in there.
A lot of overlap.
And if they're going to spend, 2 hours talking about it, I mean, it is kind of a little bit of a question as to why. Now, does that mean I feel threatened or upset? No. Does that mean I'm going? Of course not. But, I mean, there it is. I mean, I think it's
I've
worth.
brought that up as a problem.
So the question is
think
what
it's
they're
a-
discussing relevant to us, that we need to be there? If not, then I don't think it's necessary. for us
It's
to be
what
there.
we're discussing is more relevant to them than what they're discussing being relevant to us, technically.
I went to the retreats in the past, and so has Lindy. And, some of the stuff is a little bit relevant, but it's more informational for us. I wouldn't think you're not gonna miss anything if you weren't there. You can read their memos that we get as part of the packet when we have
Right.
development issues, and you would still get the same types of information. If I wasn't kayaking, I probably would go, because I think it's good to understand where they're thinking and what they're doing, because we are all, part of the city. But I don't think and Lindy will report what happens.
Yeah, and I've also very much encouraged them to come to some of our meetings, because there doesn't seem to be any communication with what I call the big three. Planning Commission, City Council, and EDA, and I'm just so frustrated with it.
See, I
It's
think that's
crazy.
really the big two, and then
you guys are so ridiculous.
the footnote.
I thought the big three was the school board, the city council. the planning
Okay, I'm
commission.
sorry. Anyway, those three
Actually,
groups are
in
not
that order,
communicating.
in that order.
It's only a big one. Who are we
You
kidding?
know what, I will say this.
The mics are off, aren't they?
The EDA does have some real significant powers that they can
Right.
land bank, they can do bonds, they can do some really powerful things to encourage economic development in a city, and I would personally love to see them do it. And they do talk about it at these retreats, and this is an opportunity to maybe promote that to them. Yes, we'd love to see you land bank.
I just think, to be honest with you, I think you guys all sound so petty. Let them talk about whatever they want to talk about. What difference does it make?
We're not saying they can't talk about it.
No. Or then don't go to the meetings. I guess I don't understand what you guys are saying.
It
They're
was-
stepping on your toes. Ignore them.
It was a little, we'll pick this up later. Okay, other business, anyone?
If
Other
I may
business?
interrupt for a moment,
Yes.
I've got to head downstairs.
Okay.
Ms.
Have
G
fun.
will be able to.
Look, we had Paul longer than he thought. Okay.
Thanks,
Anyone, other business?
Yeah, but before Paul, as he's listening, you can walk and listen. There's a great concern that I think should be, that everybody should be aware of, is that within all this milieu of the politics at hand, anonymous people are sending out letters under the Little City logo without having
they
their
wanna do
name
that?
or clarification. A lot of people have gotten them, and they're confused because they think it comes from the city. And I hope that the city attorney's looking at it, but I think this is a real concern because they're coming out against Mason Row.
Right.
But the whole thing is, it looks like it's got the little city on it, and that is a legal beagle thing. It is a trademark, and nobody can use it. And so, and again, people just think they can go ahead and do anything without putting their name on it. Just drives me crazy. Just wanted to say it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was that other business? Okay, motion to approve the minutes?
I have some corrections.
Okay.
I'm
awesome.
sorry, I'm sorry.
No, I love that. I love that.
My comments, lines 281 to 286. She stated there is no problem with the concept chapter, but the building heights, LED lighting, and train station all need more discussion. I think what I said, or if I didn't say that, is what I meant. She stated that there is no problem having a concept chapter as part of the document.
That makes sense.
But building heights, LED lighting, and the train station, etc. And the other thing is, there's no paragraph about what Russ said about sticking to the zoning code. I would like you to review that and add that if possible. I thought that was something that we all agreed on.
Yes.
That's all.
Your disagreements were in here, but that's a good catch.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But we did agree with what Russ said.
Motion to approve the minutes
So moved.
as revised.
As revised.
So moved?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay.
Abstained.
Planning Commission reports, seeing none. Planning Director's report, seeing none. Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Yay.